What's going on, guys? My name is Lieben, and today I am here with my 2009 Mazda 6. And what I will be doing actually is replacing the valve cover gasket on the engine. And if it's not pretty obvious why, I can go ahead and show you guys that it is because you can see all around it is basically leaking. So pretty much this valve cover gasket that it already has on here is blown, so I'm gonna go ahead and replace it with a new one, and then after that I can actually go ahead and clean the engine and wash it to go ahead and clean off the oil stains. So what I like to do first when I'm always gonna be disconnecting connectors and stuff like that is start off by disconnecting the battery. Now this battery has been having some issues where the car's not starting, so I want to make sure that the battery is actually holding a charge before actually buying a new one. So I've actually already had this one disconnected because I'm trying to charge it, but they're basically two 8mm bolts, one holding down each one of the terminals. So that's pretty simple. And so now I can actually start with kind of disassembling everything on top of the engine. Okay, and as for the engine cover right here, as far as I know, it's just kind of like popped into place with some clips, so you should be able to just pry it up. Yep, and it actually seems to just be holding on. If you guys can see, it actually just seems to be holding on to two clips right here. Alright, and now that the engine cover is off, as you guys can see, there are quite a bit of cables and hoses that are going over the valve cover, but honestly I don't think it should be that difficult. Everything kind of has bands and stuff like that where it goes to the location that it needs to go, so it is kind of self-explanatory when disconnecting like the cables, for example, for the ignition coils, and then all the bolts and stuff like that. But one thing that you could also do if you guys are scared about maybe not putting everything back where it's supposed to be, you could also label where everything goes, or maybe making some sort of diagram. But I'm just gonna go through and basically kind of start from what's most simple to me, which would be taking off the ignition coils and then just basically going around the perimeter of the valve cover to see what actually goes connected onto it, and just disconnecting and unbolting everything. So starting off with the ignition coils, you can see that there are two guides right here. Those are guides for the engine cover that we just took off. So they actually have a space right here to use either a wrench or a socket. It would probably have to be a deep socket. It's a 15mm socket, so if you just go ahead and put it on here, as long as you have your wrench, your ratchet in the right side, you just go ahead and put it on right here, and they're actually not tight at all. So, and it makes sense because it's plastic, so you really shouldn't tighten it that hard unless you're trying to crack them. And also, you just want to make sure that when you put everything back together that you put them in the right spot, or else you won't be able to put your engine cover back on. And also, because I don't know the firing order of the cylinders, I'm just going to say that this is the second one in line going left to right, the second and the fourth. But like I said, I don't know which cylinder it is. So that's just going to be for my reference when I go ahead and put those clips back on. Alright, now we can go ahead and see the 4 bolts or studs that are holding the ignition coil into place. But before I remove those, I just want to go ahead and unclip all of these here. These are pretty self-explanatory too. You just press down right here and they should pop right out like that. Sometimes because these plastic clips get old, they get really stiff, and sometimes it is difficult to pull them out. Okay, so I really just lucked out right now. I was trying to find a wrench or a socket for this bolt right here, or those studs, and I was pretty sure I didn't have a deep socket that size, so I went ahead and grabbed a 8mm wrench, and it was actually just way too loose. It was kind of catching on there, but I was scared of stripping it. And then so I went over to my toolbox, and I totally lucked out because I actually have a 5/16 socket on here, and it still fits a bit loose, but honestly it fits way better than the 8mm fit. So I'm gonna go ahead and use that one to take them off. And they're actually not really even that tight on there, so that's actually also very helpful, because if they would have been too tight, then it would be a lot more likely that they would also strip. So now the ignition coils should just pop out, and they do. And as I was taking the ignition coils out, I actually noticed that both of these ignition coils had quite a bit of oil at the bottom. I'm hoping that it's because the gaskets that actually surround them are also bad if the valve cover gasket is bad. So I'm hoping that once I replace it, that doesn't happen as much and that it's not a bigger issue. But I guess we'll find out after I've gone ahead and replaced it. So now moving on to the next thing, I'm gonna go ahead and remove this sensor right here. And then this sensor right here as well. So this one looks like I can actually just unclip the connector. It looks like it has like some wiring tape around it. I'm not sure why that is, but I think if I just push down on the clip, it should come out, and it is. So that one wasn't bad at all. I'm pretty sure this connector right here will just come off when you take the valve cover gasket, or the valve cover off. And then this one, I should also just be able to unclip as well. Okay, so this one was a bit more challenging to actually unclip, but I was finally able to do it. So this hose right here is also connected to the top of the valve cover. So I believe you just have to depress. I'm not sure if you guys can see, but there's a clip right here that's colored green, and it's the exact same on the other side. So you just want to depress them, push them towards in, pinch them basically, and it should come off. Might need to use like some sort of pliers or like a screwdriver maybe to be able to push them in, because I'm trying to do it by hand right now and it's not going that well. Alright, so that took some finessing, but I was finally able to pop it out, and here you can see better the clip right here. So right there, this green part right here, and then on the other side it's the same. You just had to push him in so that this opening can just slide right out. So I've decided from this point on, I'm basically going to work my way from the left side all the way to the right, meaning that now I'm going to focus on trying to take this wiring harness right here off. I'm not going to be able to take it completely off because it goes further down. It's probably the one that might go into the transmission. I'm not sure, but it does have some clips actually. If you see right here and right here, it has some clips that are kind of biting into the bolt, and I believe the bolt is actually holding down the valve gasket. Not the valve gasket, the valve cover. So basically what you need to do is kind of try to fit something in there. I actually have a really thin pick. You want to try to kind of insert it on there and kind of push the clips away from the thread of the stud so then that you can pull it up. I might not be able to show you guys because I'm going to kind of be blocking the view as I'm trying to open the clip and then pry up at the same time. So basically kind of like shimmying it up, because I'm not sure if I'll be able to get both clips at the same time, but what I've seen has been working. I push, let's say, the clip that's on the left side, you push it out, and then this kind of pops up a little bit. Then you go to the right side and kind of push it up from the other side, and then that's how you work it out. So it has, as far as I can tell, it has this one right here, and then it has this one right here too. So there's two clips, and after that this should be able to move more freely, and then I'll work my way down to see if there's some other clips that I can remove to kind of push it out of the way. So that took way longer than it needed to, but I actually went ahead and followed this wiring harness down, and it actually goes down to the alternator. And also another thing that I noticed was with that pointy pick that I was using, I was kind of damaging the clips, or like the teeth that were holding on the clip. So actually I went ahead and changed to a thin flathead that you could actually fit in between to push it out so I wouldn't be damaging with the pick. And also I used this to actually go ahead and go underneath the clip holding the wiring harness, and then pried it up like that. But if I actually go ahead and move this, you can kind of see. So this right here is the bolt, and I guess the stud that holds the valve cover into place. And then inside of here, probably won't be able to tell, but inside of here is where the teeth are that grab onto the thread. So that's what I was trying to basically pry off, so then I could go ahead and pry from the bottom up and then push this out. And as you guys can see, I was finally able to pry out both of them. So now this is kind of out of the way. I'll probably have to go ahead and disconnect some clips further down so I can go ahead and push it further out of the way. And I kind of went ahead and skipped the next steps, mainly because it was pretty easy and self-explanatory. I was still just trying to kind of remove the clips from this wiring harness so I had more movement with it. So basically what I did was I put a flathead on this one right here. It goes like this in there, so I kind of just stuck a flathead in between the clip and right here the engine block, and then kind of slightly just pried it, and it actually came out pretty easy. So that's how that one came off. And then there are two up front right here. So there is this one here that goes in there, and then we have this one right here which goes in down right there. And again, these ones were pretty easy. I just went ahead and used some pliers, these pliers right here that have the pointy nose, and I went ahead and squeezed on the clip and then just pushed it out. So those were pretty easy as well. And then from what I can tell, these connectors right here go into the fuel injectors, but I don't believe they're actually connected to the valve cover. I think they go lower down, so I don't think I'll have to disconnect those. So now if we move further down along here, I see there's one clip right here that is connected onto the valve cover. Then we got a bracket right here, this one right here, that also is connected to the valve cover. And actually, I think that'll be it. After I take those two things off, I think I'm gonna be ready to unbolt the bolts that are actually securing the valve cover in place. I've gone ahead and removed this clip right here, and it was the same as the clips right there. At first I didn't know, and I was just prying it, and I was kind of like ruining the clip from the bottom. But then I noticed that it has teeth as well inside that you have to spread apart so that it doesn't get caught on the threads. And as I just did that right now, it just got caught. There we go. So it doesn't get caught on these threads right here, and then you pry it up as well. I've gone ahead and also removed the nut that goes onto there, but then I also noticed that I have to go ahead and at least loosen this one, so then I can go ahead and kind of turn or swivel this bracket so that it gets out of the way of the valve cover. And in order to do that, I also have to go ahead and just unclip that hose right there and then that one right there, so then I can go ahead and just turn it on the side. So as I was removing this bolt right here, I realized that that bolt isn't for the same bracket that's down here. It's actually a different bracket, but I'm still gonna go ahead and remove it to see if that gives me more room, so then I can get the bolt that's lower down that actually does allow me to go ahead and move the big bracket that I showed earlier out of the way. Alright, and I don't know if you guys can see, but that bolt right there, that's the one that I had to take off. So I can go ahead and remove this bracket right here, the one that I already took that nut off. So that's the one I'm trying to reach. Alright, so with the help of a 10mm deep socket and an extension, I was actually able to get to that bolt and move this off to the side right there. So now this isn't connected anymore to the valve cover. And now basically from what I can see, now we can go ahead and start removing all of the bolts around the gasket, or holding the, not the gasket, holding the valve cover into place. So here in the center, I see one right there, and then I see another one right here, and then along the back I can see that one right there. Then we have one right here and one right there, and this one right here on this corner. And then we have one hiding behind the harness. It is right there. And then we move along down. We have another one right there. We have one right there. And another one right there. We have these two that are pretty easy to get to. And you can see we have that one right there as well. So I'll go ahead and start with the two in the middle and basically then just work my way around the cover. Alright, so I've gone ahead and actually loosened all of the bolts around the valve cover, and if you guys can see, they are loose, but they don't come all the way out, which is kind of good, so then you don't end up losing them. I hope that doesn't make it a little more difficult when actually trying to take it off, if they're like kind of bumping into the actual thread where they go in. I don't think so. I'll just have to pull straight up. Hopefully it lets me. The other thing that I was noticing is that the bolt that is right here was actually the most challenging because of the wiring harness. I went ahead and pulled it out from here, but I didn't notice that actually right here, right next to it, there's actually another clip holding into place. So I'll go ahead and just pop this out. I don't know if I can do it here. Oh, yep, there we go. I just popped it out, and that would have given me way more room to be able to take it off. And all of the bolts are actually 5/16, so that made it easy. I didn't have to change any sockets, but now I'll go ahead and actually take the cover off. And there's just a few things that I would like to mention as I was taking the valve cover off. The first thing is, make sure you take off your dipstick. I almost forgot about that, and if you try taking off the valve cover, then it'll just be hanging out from when you take it out. The other thing is that it is pretty stuck on there, the valve cover, so you will probably have to use some sort of like flathead or something like that to kind of pry it open. I was actually pretty surprised. I thought I might have had some bolts that I hadn't unscrewed yet, but no, it was just really that tight on there. I tried first just shaking it off with both of my hands and it wouldn't move an inch, nothing like that. So you might need to go ahead and pry it slowly. And be careful when you do that, because you could very easily damage either the valve cover or the actual engine block itself, and that would just make this way worse. Even if you change the gasket, you would probably still have an oil leak, and like I said, that would just be awful. So be very careful when you do that. What actually helped me was starting from the back. I started prying it from the back side, then actually went counterclockwise, and if you guys can see, there is a little bit of an inch or a little bit of space in between, and now when I actually move it, you can actually hear that it's coming loose. The only place where I haven't really pried at all is on this side, which is where I think that right now it's currently stuck on. So I'll continue on that side and show you guys when it's completely off. Alright guys, and here we can see that the valve cover is off now. So now I will have to go ahead and clean some of the edges off. It seems like there is some dirt and grime around the edges. You want to go ahead and clean that, so when you put the new seal, it actually makes a good seal and then oil doesn't leak out anymore. And then as for the valve cover itself, I will go ahead and kind of give it a quick wash too. I'll go ahead and clean it from the inside and the outside. If you clean it with water, you just want to make sure that you're going to go ahead and wipe it dry too, because you don't want to have water in your engine either. Okay, so I've gone ahead and cleaned around the surface right here where it's going to be touching the valve cover. Basically all I did was I grabbed a straight edge razor and was kind of just peeling off of the debris and gasket or RTV that was on there, and I was using a clean rag also to kind of push away all of the debris. Also, you don't want to push it into the engine because that could cause problems later down the road. But yeah, this was pretty much as clean as I could get it, which I don't really think it's that bad. And now moving on to the engine cover. I went ahead and just gave it a simple, really fast clean through, partly because due to lack of time, I'm trying to get this done all in the same day. But honestly, compared to how it looked before, really just dusty and dirt and debris everywhere, it doesn't look that bad. The most difficult parts were actually right there, the small little crevices where I really couldn't get into. But I mean, maybe later on when I have more time, I'll go ahead and do a better, a more thorough clean through. And if we turn it around, I also went ahead and tried cleaning as much as I could inside, especially right here where the gasket is actually going to be on top of, and where there was also some RTV. I went ahead and cleaned all around there too, so it's actually looking pretty clean. And if we look over here, that is the old gasket, valve cover gasket right there. I mean, it looks alright, I mean in decent condition, but obviously just because it looks good doesn't mean that it was already worn out. And if we look right here, this is the new one. It's obviously a different color, but I went ahead and already inspected it, and I would say it pretty much looks identical. So now I'll go ahead and put this new one on the valve cover, so then we can go ahead and put the valve cover back on the engine. Alright, and like I said, I just went ahead and put a little bit of RTV there on all of the corners, and as well as the one here in the center that seal the spark plugs. I just went ahead and put some RTV so that it would stick better when I go ahead and flip it around and put it onto the engine. And then after that, I went ahead and cleaned the excess off because I didn't want that to cause the seal to sit uneven and not make a proper seal. And I actually almost forgot, you do also have to put a very small amount of RTV where the valve or the timing change cover meets the actual engine block, so you can kind of see there's a line that divides both of them. And just to be safe, you should put some on there so there isn't any oil leaking through them. Alright, so now that I have it down, seated in place, I went ahead and made sure that the valve cover, or the valve cover gasket, didn't pop out in any place, because the last thing you want to do is start tightening it when the gasket is out and damaging the gasket. But now that I know everything's seated in place, I can go ahead and start tightening down the bolts. So now that I've gone ahead and tightened all the bolts by hand, I was actually trying to find some sort of torquing sequence online. I couldn't find one for this exact model. This is a 2.5 4-cylinder. The closest one I was able to find actually is for a 2.3 cylinder. So the head gasket does look a little different, but all of the bolts on this one here on my phone are in the same exact location as this one here. So I'm guessing even though the engine is a little bit different, that this sequence is still the same. So I'm actually going to go ahead and follow the sequence, and actually to the side it actually also says the torque specs as well. So it's going to be anywhere from 70.9 to 106.2 inch-pounds of torque. Now, if any of you guys can find information on this exact model for the 2.5 4-cylinder, you guys can always leave it down in the comment section so I can actually go ahead and look at it. Like I said, I don't think it would differ too much from it, but I would like to know the exact specs for this car. So now I will go ahead and get my torque wrench and start torquing these bolts down. Okay, and actually the torque specs that I have set here right now is 80 inch-pounds. So I'm gonna go ahead and start off with that, and depending on how that feels, then I'll go ahead and go through the sequence again and tighten them more up. So guys, I've gone ahead and tightened down the bolts of the valve cover. I didn't show the process for a few reasons. One being that it was pretty repetitive, so I didn't want to show the same thing again. but more importantly, because as I was tightening them down, I was feeling that they were getting pretty tightened, and my torque wrench wasn't clicking. So I kind of started doubting. I really don't have that much experience using a torque wrench, so I wasn't sure if I was doing it right. So I went ahead and still tightened them down with the same sequence that it said. The only thing, I went ahead and lowered down the inch-pounds of torque that I went ahead and used, just because I didn't feel comfortable continuing going on. The last thing I wanted to do was go ahead and snap one of these bolts and make it a way bigger issue. So I went ahead and lowered down the inch-pounds for all of them. At least that way they would be even, and I wouldn't have some bolts more tighter than the others. But I didn't stay at the 80 inch-pounds that I first initially said. So like I've said multiple times, I would recommend, when you guys always do this, to go ahead and try to do your guys' research. It could be that the information that I found wasn't the most accurate, so go ahead and always do your guys' research before you guys take on a project like this. Like I said, I feel comfortable. It's definitely pretty tight on there, so I don't have any concerns that it's not tight on there, because it does feel pretty snug. But at the same time, you could always damage threads and all that if you over tighten it. So now I will go ahead and put everything that goes onto the valve cover back on. Alright guys, and let me just say, putting everything back together was way faster than having to take everything apart. It didn't even take me half the time it took me to go ahead and take everything off. But I mean, that's probably because I already knew where everything went and how to do everything. But yeah guys, here we have it. I finally was able to go ahead and put that valve gasket back on. I'm pretty confident that now the car isn't going to be leaking oil from the top now. And I've looked from the bottom, it doesn't seem to be leaking any oil from the bottom, or at least dripping onto the floor. So this was the only oil leak they had. So yeah guys, if any of you guys are considering trying to replace the valve cover gasket on this car, I honestly say it's been one of the easier ones. It was definitely a lot easier than on my 350Z. On that one, you have to take the plenum spacer off, you have to take the air intake out, and it's way more steps. Honestly, this one right here was a lot simpler to go ahead and do. But yeah, that's gonna be it for today's video guys. If you guys liked it, please go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one.
Repeat after me. Hakuna Matata.